My name is Nate Mitchell. I'm Vice President of Product at Oculus. That's it. Sorry.
And I'm Palmer. I'm the founder of Oculus.
And so it's a huge week for you guys. You have been tossing out at least an announcement every single day.
God.
Announcements every day. Yeah.
Taxing. Did you see the news this morning about Unreal?
Yeah.
Pretty cool news.
Didn't have time between when I woke up between now to cover it, but so in that vein, what are you guys showing today?
So what we're showing is the latest developer kit. So this is really the first time we've shown off, at least publicly, the 7-inch development kit integrated with all of our latest demos. So we've got a bunch of cool stuff. We've got Hawken integrated with the Rift, early version. We've got a driving game with a steering wheel controller that you can see over there.
I named it Drive VR.
Yeah, simple Unity game that we actually built with assets off the Unity asset store. So it's not sleek, it's not Gran Turismo 5, but it's pretty neat. We've got TF2,
which is shipping right now.
Which is actually live, right? And we've got Epic Citadel, and we've got Unreal Engine. So
we've got Unreal, Unity, we've got Source, we've got it all.
We've got a lot of different engines, a lot of different experiences over there.
Do you have any date for when Hawken's actually going to be playable for everything else?
Hopefully by the time most people have their development kits, it'll be live. We don't have an exact date yet.
Palmer, can you tell me what your favorite game currently to play with the Oculus Rift is?
No.
No, you can't. No. Okay, of the games that you can talk about.
Team Fortress 2.
Okay.
I really like Team Fortress 2. It's my most played game in my Steam library, so I'm a huge fan. I'm really glad we get to play it in the Rift now.
Okay, and it sounds like maybe there's some other even more fun game that maybe you can't talk about.
Well, we're leaving announcements all up to developers, so we're not making announcements for anyone.
Fair enough. Is the consumer version going to make the developer kit obsolete? Are you going to need to buy the consumer version to play the new games, or are you going to be able to use the
I mean, the way that the SDK is designed is if you make a game work with our SDK on the current developer kits, it's supposed to just work with future versions. And so we imagine that it would be possible for games to support the older Rift. What we expect that will happen though is people will buy these development kits now. They're basically tools. The future Rifts are going to be much higher resolution, much lighter, much more comfortable, have vastly improved feature set. I don't think people are going to want to necessarily play their games on this on their old Rift when they can get a new one for a couple $100. Especially if it has features that we don't have in the current one. People are going to be designing games at that point for the actual consumer Rift, not to be backwards compatible with old hardware. So the answer is, you'll probably be able to get a lot of stuff working to some degree, but I think everyone is going to want to upgrade.
With the SDK, is there any chance that people will be able to use their homemade Rift kits to work with that?
Probably not, and the main reason is just the Oculus tracker. A big part of the SDK is interfacing with the tracker and doing a lot of the sensor fusion.
Now we provide access to the raw data, so if people want to, pipe in their own data into the SDK, into the engine, they can figure something out. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work with Rift titles, because if I'm making a game for the Rift, I'm going to be, using the Oculus tracker in the Oculus SDK. So if people want to make demos for their own Rifts, that shouldn't be too hard, but actually working with games are going to need an actual.
At one point you were saying the tracker might become something available separately.
We're still looking into it. We're not sure if we'll be able to do it or not. It's something that'd be cool to do.
And how about the latency testers?
Latency testers, good.
It's coming well.
It's coming well. It's a struggle trying to balance how to make something that is obviously a really great tool, but also it's going to be a low quantity thing. Not every single developer wants one or needs one. And even if you are a developer that needs one, you only need one. You don't need everybody on your development team to have their own latency tester, because people are working on assets, level design, they don't need to be testing latency all of the time. So we're trying to balance how to make this a great tool and get it out there with limited manufacturing, but we're sure we're on a good path to figuring it out.
So, tracker, latency, what is your current kind of best scenario end-to-end latency?
Best scenario, I think
it's a low 30 millisecond range, best case. Worst case, assuming you're running at 60 frames per second, is low 50 millisecond range. It's more complex than then what's our latency? The point is, once you're there, the latency is in our hardware. Latency can get much worse in the game engine if it has lots of buffering or if it's running at a low frame rate. But in terms of our hardware, if it's running at 60 frames per second.
And so just to clarify here for the audience, I mean, the 60 frames a second, just like Palmer mentioned, some graphics cards will buffer extra frames or something. So the game could be running 120 frames a second. But if the graphics card is buffering 5 or 6 frames, you do end up with a higher latency. So assuming optimal settings, I think that's the important point. We're down to between 30 and 40.
Yeah, I'm just trying to address the latency of our own hardware.
Yeah, and so for a game developer, that's where you want to be, right? You want to optimize your engine, so if you're running 60 frames a second, you're in that range. And we'll get better over time. I think we've already done a lot. And
our Unreal and Unity integrations are really solid. They're performing pretty well.
Exactly.
And now for the SDK, you guys are planning on launching this week, right?
If everything goes according to plan, we want the SDK to be out there in the best possible shape for the first drop. To be honest, we would have liked it to be out already. And it's not the SDK that's being delayed, it's we're putting the finishing touches on the developer center. So making sure easy to...
We want to support the SDK, not just put it out there. Yeah. We want to have a way to work with developers and work with them on their issues and have a way for them to report problems with the SDK.
Right. So forums, a ticketing system.
Exactly. So the SDK has obviously been in use for a while by all the devs in our partner preview, and they've been using the developer center. And we've been just kind of putting the final polish on that, making sure everything's perfect. We've been updating our doc the last week, doing a lot to make sure our documentation is really tight. So we're super close.
So are you planning on just making the SDK as good as you can get it, putting it out there, or do you anticipate doing regular updates?
Absolutely regular updates. I mean, we see it. There's absolutely, we'll be fixing bugs, we'll be adding features. The development community is going to be really heavily involved, in fact, in the roadmap for the SDK. We're looking for developers to step up and say, we need this feature, or there's a bug here, or it'd be really nice if we had X. Those are the things we want to provide. So that's a big reason why we launched the Kickstarter to begin with, to involve, developers, game developers in our dev process. And that's why it's so important that the dev center be super tight so we can work with developers and really hear their feedback effectively.
Positional tracking is obviously kind of your number one priority for the consumer model.
In high resolution displays.
Yeah. Assuming you come across some great solution for it, is that something you would potentially release before the consumer model so people could tack it on to the developer kit and start working?
We don't know. It really depends. It depends on how it ends up interfacing with the software, with the hardware and the software actually. But we'll keep people as best we can posted on progress as we go.
We're trying to do as much as we can, as fast as we can. And obviously on one end, if we came out with a magical $1 chip that gives you positional tracking and all you do is glue it on, yeah, that'd be great. We'd probably want to put something out as soon as possible. Realistically, it's not going to be that simple. So speculating on whether or not there's going to be an add-on yet, when we don't even know exactly how we're going to accomplish it, is a bit far out.
I imagine you've got some prototypes that you put together with an 1080p or greater screen. How has that changed the experience? Does this look nicer, or do you think it adds to
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you imagine we have prototypes? You can use your imagination.
I was going to say, just briefly, the jump from 720 to 1080, just that jump alone is really quite a significant difference, and especially just in terms of DPI, right? And that's when the Rift's focus is immersing you visually in the world. Obviously, the screen is sort of at the crux of the whole experience. So the higher resolution panel, the higher fidelity, the visual experience, the more immersive, the more immersed you feel in the game. So we're super excited to get higher resolution panels in there. Definitely the community should be too. It's going to be really, really cool to see them.
So when you went from it was 5.6 inch screen originally, right, to 7-inch display, did that change the field of view at all?
It changed the field of view very slightly. It wasn't a huge increase. It was a very slight increase. People talked about being able to see the edges on your periphery before. This makes it so that you can't see the periphery. And we've adjusted a lot of stuff. We basically had to completely redesign the headset when we switched to the 7-inch. We had to redesign, our optic system, our mounting system, the shell, everything. but the goal wasn't to radically change the field of view. It was to try to make something that was very similar to the original development kit, using the hardware that was available to us.
A lot of people are wondering where the big players are, and I'm sure this is on your mind. Are you concerned that they're going to jump into the game, Sony, Microsoft, with a head-mounted display for their consoles?
You know, I think that we're focused on what we're doing. I think for us, you know,
what would we do differently if they
Right.
were? It's like, well, okay, so they are going to do it. Does that mean we should just, you know, keel over and give up? No, we're going to keep trying to make the best VR device that we can, and we think that we're in a really good position.
Yeah, I was going to say that just to echo those exact same sentiments. You know, we're building an awesome team. We're really happy with where the SDK is at. We're proud of the hardware we've put together. You know, we do think that we're building a platform for VR. So if the other big guys want to come in, they can come in and compete. But they'll be competing against what we think will be one of the top teams in the industry. So we're trying. We're trying to make VR happen. That's the dream, and we'll do everything we can to make sure it does.
50% of the Kickstarter backers were international. Is that surprising?
I think it was surprising. It was actually initially because we just didn't expect. I guess we thought
it's not even normal for Kickstarter.
Yes.
It's very rare for campaigns to have here's an example. A lot of Kickstarter projects are very, very localized. It'll be a dude getting money from realistically like his friends and family to contribute to his music project or something. Then there's ones like that get a lot of coverage in maybe a particular niche, like the 3D printing world, covering the Form 1. It's very rare for a Kickstarter to get international coverage with people all around the world all being interested in it. So it was kind of a unique thing for Kickstarter, and really kind of surprising to us because we didn't expect that people all over the world would be interested in what we have.
And we definitely tried, right? I mean, Palmer and I, well, you can look back, we were at Gamescom, in Germany, in Cologne, in the middle of the Kickstarter. But it wasn't until the Kickstarter ended that we saw that those efforts sort of paid off in a way. I mean, it wasn't that we were looking for more international backers. We were just trying to get the Rift out there to see if more developers, were aligned where we were with, wanting to make VR happen. Were they happy with the?
We wanted to show it to them, and they weren't going to fly over to the U.S. to come check out this thing.
But I think Palmer's dead on that Kickstarter demographics were sort of an anomaly in that sense. So to see over 50% when we, finished the campaign, we're like, oh man, we have to ship over 50% of these things internationally.
It's so much fun.
Yeah, it makes it an enjoyable experience.
Yeah. I know you have a talk at GDC this week. Do you have one as well?
I do. Okay. So my talk is running the VR gauntlet. VR ready, are you? And it's really about the challenges associated with building VR experiences. It goes into, we'll be talking about a lot of different things, but we've already touched on a lot of it in some of our other interviews. Scale of worlds, UI, how do you do user interfaces, main menus, HUDs, loading screens, how do you integrate those into a VR game? Latency, a lot of the things that both game designers and engine engineers need to think about when they're building sort of games for the Rift. So, and I'll be doing that with Mike Antonoff, our chief software officer.
Are you on that same talk? Or
no, I'm on another talk, and I'll be talking a lot about consumer virtual reality, working on VR games, and big part of my talk will be about why this is possible now and why we're seeing such a huge VR community that's just appearing now rather than 3, 5, 10 years ago.
Would you say 2013 is still a good goal for a consumer model?
We don't know. I mean, it's almost like a cop-out, but it really is too early to say. We're putting out these developer kits so that people can give us feedback and say, we need these features, or prioritize this feature, not just in the hardware, but in the SDK. And depending on what feedback we get from developers, we might have to mix up the consumer version a little bit differently. So it's too early for us to give an exact timeline on when we would release it, but we're working really hard on it. It's not like we're just sitting around waiting to hear back. We've got people prototyping, working on all kinds of things that we know we do definitely want to do. In the office right now, just working on it.
To add to that, I think a big part of it is content. People push their you guys gotta ship the consumer version as fast as you can. Today there's no games for it. There's one game released with true Rift support, and that's TF2.
And that's an experimental mode that's launched via a launch command.
So, we really do. we truly believe that the hardware is only good as the software that runs on it. So for us, we've done everything we can to empower the indie community, empower game developers, give them everything they need to build awesome VR experiences. Now they need to take those tools and actually, build games for the Rift before we're ready to ship something. Otherwise, we ship it and there's nothing to do with it, and that can actually kill a game, a platform, because if there's no games, then there's no audience. If there's no audience, then there's no games. So right now we're focused on building a great platform, and we'll get there when we get there.
Now I know you guys have been really busy. You might not have had much time to pay attention, but are there any indie projects or community projects that you guys have seen people are talking about and working on that are really exciting?
The gallery?
Yeah, the gallery is really cool. Yeah, the gallery does look really cool. Sound Self is on Kickstarter right now. That's a super cool project. They're doing some really cool stuff. You should definitely talk to Robin, the guy working on it. He's a really cool guy, and he's making it with Rift support in mind from the beginning. Like, we met up with him at PAX last year, and she showed us some really cool demos, and we have some more modern builds. We've talked to a lot of other indies that haven't made announcements, and we're not going to make their announcements for them. There's a lot of other cool indie titles that are excited about working with Rift.
If you could have one current day game that's out right now, or recently announced to work fully functional with VR, just theoretically, what would it be?
So for me, I always answer the same games. Dark Souls.
You like Dark Souls?
I love Dark Souls.
I don't know. For me, Team Fortress 2 is pretty great. I mean, I've played more TF2 than any other game in my Steam library, so it's kind of that's kind of a #1 title right there for me. Fallout 3 would be a really cool title. I sure would love to see a sequel to Chrono Trigger in VR somehow, but that's not like even a game. That's more just like a wish. Like, I wish this would happen.
Yeah. I think a lot of the multiplayer experiences are going to be really interesting. Complete deviation from Dark Souls, but games like TF2, any game where the three of us are in the world together and we're sort of sharing an experience, but in VR, it's just such a different connection to be able to be like, hey Palmer, what's going on? And look sort of in your friend's eyes and be like, high five, let's go, and take off running down to capture a point or
so corny.
Push the feeling. It is corny, but I do think that's it's super corny. But I do think that the multiplayer experiences will be some of the most fun. And at least that's gaming for me. I like to play social games. Again, deviation from Dark Souls, but TF2 is a game I enjoy. I really like Counter-Strike. I think we're both, multiplayer gamers. So.
I want to see a sweet MMO, virtual reality MMO, Sword Art Online for real.
I hear lots of people talking about it.
Have you seen Sword Art Online?
I haven't seen it myself, but
we must get that question about 100 times.
Hey Palmer, have you ever heard of Sword Art? Those questions I don't mind. I feel bad for people who write. Then they write a 6-paragraph synopsis of the entire plot, and I'm like, I've already seen it.
Head-mounted displays, passive and just ridiculously expensive. You guys have a pretty great one at a great price. So have you been approached by any of the kind of military or research people who were used to paying $10,000 for a head-mounted the same experience?
Tons of them. I mean, I came out of that space, so it wasn't even as approaching so much as them just firing me an email saying, hey Palmer, can you get me one of these? Yeah, there's a ton of people who are very interested, and it's not just because of the cost. It really is one of the lightest, widest field of view head mounts on the market. So even if they have unlimited money to spend, these people are still interested in getting a Rift, and I think that really shows a lot.
All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, our pleasure.
Congratulations on your success so far, and I hope that everything pans out.
Thank you
Let's
very
hope.
much.
Yes.